Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our afternoon, I suppose, sort of tea or lunch with Elizabeth C Bunce. She is the author of the Premeditated Myrtle series, and we're excited to be chatting with her today. If you're joining us on Facebook or on AirMeet, why don't you just give us a shout out in the chat area, say hi, let us know where you're from. Maybe you want to share what your favorite book is, and if you've read the Myrtle series or not. We'd love to know. We love hearing from fans during these events. You're also invited in the chat area to drop any questions that you have, and we'll be asking Elizabeth questions as we go through the afternoon here today. So we'd love to have some reader questions to pose to her as well. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Terry. I'm one of the co-owners of Swamp Fox Bookstore, an independent women-owned bookstore in Marion, Iowa. We opened in July of 2020, so early days of the pandemic, and then we survived a derecho, a natural disaster, just about a month later. So we're going strong after just over a year and a half in business, or going on a year and a half in business, and we're really excited. We're located near the Uptown District in Marion, and we have just 360 square feet of books, which, believe it or not, you can fit about 2,500 books in that kind of space. So it's pretty jam-packed and a lot of new worlds to discover, like the world of Myrtle Hardcastle. We're excited to have Elizabeth C Bunce, who is from Iowa originally, and this is her first event, quote unquote, in Iowa. We're excited to have that honor. She is the Edgar Award-winning author of the Myrtle Hardcastle mystery series, beginning with Premeditated Myrtle, the 2021 Edgar Allan Poe Edgar Award winner, a Society of Midland Authors honoree, a Library of Congress 2021 Books Festival selection, and an Amazon Top 20 Children's Book of the Year for 2020. An Indie Next Pick, which of course is near and dear to my heart, and a nominee for both the Agatha Award and the Anthony Award. The series continues with How to Get Away with Myrtle, available now. Cold-Blooded Myrtle, which has arrived. And in Myrtle Peril, to be published in 2022. Her first novel, A Curse Dark as Gold, won the inaugural William C. Morris Award for the young adult debut novel and was named a Smithsonian Notable Book and a Amelia Bloomer Project Selection. And her high fantasy Thief Errant series includes this novel Star-Crossed, The Liar's Moon. I think I missed a line there. That was the Chicago's Public Library Best of the Book 2010, and Liar's Moon, one of Kirkus Blog's favorite YA novels of 2011. Star-Crossed and A Curse Dark as Gold have appeared on Oprah's Kids Reading List, and her novels have been named the ALA's Best Fiction for her young adult list, and she is a 4-time Kansas Notable Book winner. An accomplished needlewoman and historical costumer. I should ask questions about that. That's amazing.
Go ahead.
Elizabeth lives in the Midwest with her husband, her cats, and we're sending positive thoughts your way for Leo today. And a boggart who steals books. So welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you. This is so fun. I'm really, really happy to be here this afternoon.
Awesome. So tell us, what is or I should say night, because we were talking earlier, you're a night owl. So what is the day in the life of an author like for you?
It's funny because this week has been, as you mentioned, I have a cat in the hospital right now. He's been there since last Wednesday. So my week is completely thrown asunder from what it would normally be, which is a lot of getting up early, feed the cats, take a long sleep, get up late, and write all day, well into the night. And I write when I'm writing, when I'm on deadline. I write 7 days a week, usually 5 or 6 hours a day. But my husband reminded me, I heard him telling his mom about my birthday recently, and he said, she spends all this time reading. I spend probably half my day doing research for the historical underpinnings of the books that I write. And that means, digging through archives online, or looking at old newspaper records, or completely and utterly defacing nonfiction books with a pen and writing notes to myself and dog-earing them. And, the more obscure the topic of the book, I think the more it feels like it was written just for me and a book that I'm writing. And so it's always such a thrill to discover those strange niche titles that you wonder, someone was really passionate enough about this subject to write an entire book of it, and it found its reader, which is I can understand how that's exciting.
What's the most
And goes
unusual
in.
title or topic you found that you in your research?
Oh wow! Well, so Cold Blooded Myrtle has a lot of, it's set at Christmas time during the Victorian era, and there are, oh, I wish I had this at my fingertips. There is a Victorian book on the history of Christmas, which was a very, very, very sort of Victorian thing. There was a resurgence of interest, scholarly interest in folklore and sort of the origins and the development of folk beliefs and holidays and traditions and things. And so the book is called something like The Origins of Christmas or The Holiday of Christmas. And then the subtitle goes on for an entire page listing everything you're going to find in the book, recipes, its origins and traditions, its modern evolution, stories of chivalric deeds and heroic feats. And it's just, was like, well, okay, I feel like you have really overpromised the content of this book. Um,
Hopefully, it delivered.
yeah, it did on several levels, but yeah, that I got a huge kick out of that particular subtitle.
Did you try any of the recipes?
Not yet, but it has been my goal for a few years now, and this is the year I will be making a proper Christmas pudding.
Ooh, exciting.
So
You find
that's
all the ingredients and try it out.
yeah.
You do it for Thanksgiving or gonna wait till Christmas?
I'll probably do it a little bit early. Not because I'm gonna soak it in rum, which is what you would traditionally do. There is a holiday in England that occurs unfortunately just before the start of Premeditated Myrtle. It was about a week too early for the pacing of the book. But the first Sunday of Advent, which is the liturgical calendar that covers the Christmas season, so it's usually right at the end of November. The first Sunday of Advent is called Stirring Up Sunday in Britain because that's the day you make your Christmas pudding. So you're stirring up the Christmas pudding, and you're kind of stirring up the holiday spirit at the time, and then it takes a month or so to soak in rum, and so that you can
Sounds
light it
delicious.
on fire on the big day. But I'm hoping, I do a Myrtle Mondays post every Monday on my blog, so it'll be sometime around that, I think.
Awesome. We'll keep an eye out for that to see if that was a successful recipe you found, or you have to find something new for next year. So, what inspires you to write the most? How did Myrtle come to be?
Well, so Myrtle, I think, I has my favorite origin story of any of my books, and it actually has several parts to it, but I'll try to compress it. In one sense, I've written several YA fantasies, and that's sort of what I always pictured myself writing, but they were trending kind of darker and sexier and older and more violent. And I was at the same time getting all of this fan mail from fifth and sixth graders who were really inspired by and really drawn to the books that I was writing. And I had one reader write and ask if my next book could be thicker because one of them wasn't long enough for her. So the dense prose and the historical settings and the strong female protagonists and the kind of darker themes, I think I had these younger readers, and I thought I need to write something for them. And fortunately, I had already had kind of a niggling idea of what that might be, because, as mentioned, not morning people. And years ago, a few years ago, my husband and I were staggering through a morning routine, trying to get the day going. I was trying to send him off to work, and at the same time, attempting to have a cogent conversation about something on the news. And one of us tried to say something about premeditated murder, and it came out premeditated Myrtle. And I looked at him and I said, "That is a middle grade mystery."
Yes.
And so when I started realizing how many middle grade fans I had, they're all, they're no longer middle grade readers, but it seemed they have siblings or coming up after them. But I thought, this is the perfect chance to marry that fun idea of a middle grade mystery with my middle grade readers. And
Perfect title.
um, yeah.
Awesome. So, is there a particular reason why you chose to set it during the era that you set it in?
Yes, because well, first, so originally the idea for premeditated Myrtle, the one that just sort of sat there for a while until I actually knew what I was writing, was going to be a contemporary novel set in a college town near Kansas City, and it just never went anywhere, because every time I try to write something set in the modern era, I fail completely at world building. I get there, I'm like, how do people eat? And how do you make a telephone call? And how do you say, I just was like, I forget every detail of everyday practical life. And so I've never managed yet to write a novel set in the 21st century. Um, but when I started thinking more about Myrtle and more about what her passions were, um, and when she started talking to me more and more, I knew that she was obsessed with forensic science. And the most interesting era in the history of forensic science is that very end of the 19th century, when um, police work had become more institutionalized, formalized, and professional. And the English court system was undergoing sort of a modernization as well. And there was this explosion of public faith in the ability of science to solve everything, including crimes. And so I loved the idea of a young girl who was just obsessed with all things modern and the most modern, cutting edge ways of solving crimes. And that's, all the it's one of the most interesting eras in the history of forensic science, I think. But I've spent the last several years in a deep dive into it, so I'm a little bit biased.
What I like about Cold Blooded Myrtle so far is that in this one, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody, it has a very personal connection to her family, and she tries to act not interested in the murders.
Yeah, yeah. She's very successful at that. Yeah, she's a very impartial investigator in her own mind.
Yeah. She's like, I don't need to, and I'm not going here to ask
Yeah,
anybody questions or look at anything. We're just gonna go, and if something happens to happen, it happens.
yeah. I can't help it if they drop a dead body on my doorstep. Not my fault. Yeah,
Sort of
I
like
wasn't looking for that. Yeah,
it's sort of like the murder mysteries on TV, where it seems like wherever Angela Lansbury was, there was always a murder in that small town, just like it followed her everywhere.
exactly. And so there's a similar series in England called Midsummer Murders, and
Yes.
and that show is an hour and a half long, and is always at least there are always at least two murders in that. And I was like, okay, so which show had more murders? Was it Murder She Wrote or Midsummer Murders? And it's Murder She Wrote, just because it was on for so many seasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. Yeah, that and the little town of Swinburne, where Myrtle lives, has expanded as necessary. to
That's the nice thing
accommodate.
about building your own little town is you can expand it as you need to.
Yes, yeah, and that was something that I knew kind of right from the beginning. When I was writing book two, How to Get Away with Myrtle, when they go on a train journey to the seaside, and I looked at a lot of and England is an island, so there are seaside resorts ringing the entire coastline,
Mhm.
and so there are hundreds to choose from, but I wanted like this element from this village and this element from that village. And when you make this sort of composite, you get to incorporate all of the most interesting historical facts, but align them so they work with your plot as necessary and feel as free to take your inspiration for the plot from the research.
There's a
So,
local author here, Heather Gudenkoff, who writes thrillers and suspense, and she always sets her stories in a fictional town in Iowa that it sounds vaguely like a town that you know. So,
oh,
her most recent one, there was a cave system nearby, and was inspired by Makokata, which is just down the road from us. So,
sure.
it's a nice thing to be able to do that, and take your favorite parts to help it shape your story.
And so, Cold Blooded, of course, for my Iowa readers, Central Iowa readers in particular, may recognize the building that is on the cover of the book, and that would be the Iowa State Campanile from my hometown of Ames, and it forms the Schofield College Campanile. It's in Cold Blooded Myrtle incarnation.
I
Um,
wondered. I've been to
yeah,
that campus, so I wondered if it was inspired by theirs.
yes, that is it forms the genesis of the cold case that Myrtle is solving in this book.
It's not just a cold case, it's a cold time of year.
Yes, yes. They get so I had a critique partner read the first Myrtle book when I was working on it, and she got to the point, she got somewhere in the middle of the book, and she was like, "Aren't they ever going to have some nice weather?" Like,
It's
no,
England.
it's
There's
England.
never nice weather in England.
So yeah. It's damp and it's chilly and it's unpredictably gorgeous despite it.
Yes, yes. So when did you know you wanted to be a writer? Did you go to college or university to be a writer? I know you said you went to the University of Iowa, but I'm not sure. Did you do the writers program there or not?
Yes. So by that point, yes, I was well on my way to really knowing this is what I wanted to do with my life. It took a little longer as a kid so I was my a huge reader as a kid. Books were the gift of choice for for everyone in our family. Our house was packed with books. We some of my fondest memories as a kid were walking from my house to the bookmobile with my mom and my big brother, and this weird tall bag that was impossibly unwieldy, and we would load it up with stacks and stacks of books. And they didn't change the stock in the bookmobile very often, so you'd always be able to find those favorite titles, Ruth Chew and the Betsy Tacy Tibb books. And I just loved exploring the world and looking outside of Ames through the lens of books and learning how large the world was and how different things could be and how exciting. And when I was about in sixth grade, I had this realization that everyone else, all of my other peers, had outgrown their imaginary friends, but mine were still sticking around. And I didn't mind, but I wondered why that was, and why I hadn't outgrown that part of childhood, that imaginary people in my head. And it took a few more years before I put it together that the books that I loved were written by real people as a job, and that I could do that too. And so that was the point at which it just lit up for me. And I knew, um, I knew.
Yeah. Yeah, that there's people behind those books. I think that when I started, I mean, I've been a lifelong reader, but the minute that I actually sat down and had a conversation with somebody that was doing it as a living, like your whole world just opens up as a reader. And that's been my favorite part of my job as a bookseller, is letting people know like what goes on behind the scenes and like how long it takes for an idea to actually end up in your hands. You had the idea for Myrtle years ago, and we're just seeing that come to fruition now. So,
and I'm just going to put a shout out to, because one of those behind the scenes people is here right now, Kelly Doyle, my amazing publicist at Algonquin Young Readers. She has put together this entire book tour, and she is a force of nature. So I am really grateful to have
hi,
her
Kelly.
on Myrtle's team. She is so fun to work with.
So, do you remember the first thing you ever wrote?
I've seen things that I've written that I wrote as a kid, but the first book I ever wrote, we had there was an initiative in Ames and possibly all of Iowa, but definitely in Ames schools, because I went to 2 different grade schools in Ames, and we had it at both schools. And it's the name of it is escaping me right now, but it was basically a little tiny printing press in the school, so where kids could come and write a book, and a teacher or a volunteer would type it up, and then the kid could illustrate it. And they had these amazing marker sets, Pentel markers that lasted forever, and they were perfect. And when I was like 20 something, I found a set of Pentel markers at Costco, and I was beside myself with glee to have my very own marker set from the book lab days. And so you would write your story, and then someone would type it up, and they'd do all the pagination, and you would illustrate it. And I did oh my gosh, so many of those. So many of them. And the first one I remember was which Myrtle would appreciate, because it was called Flubs, and it was all making fun of typos. And I was in 2nd grade. This was my idea of humor in 2nd grade, was other people's humorous bad grammar.
Oh my gosh.
there you go.
That sounds amazing. The fact that you could identify those in 2nd grade. That's amazing.
I'm suspecting, I haven't seen that particular volume in some time. And I know it's here somewhere, but someday when I unearth it, it'll be interesting to see what exactly some of the ones were.
Yes, it will. So we talked about a little bit about how Myrtle came to be. Where is Myrtle going in the future? We know we've got at least one more book coming out in 2022. How many books do you envision will be in Myrtle's universe?
Oh my gosh. I will keep writing them as long as people keep buying them, and as long as I can keep coming up with great titles. And so right now I am theoretically supposed to be working on the line edits, which is sort of my final big chunk of work on the drafting of the text. And In Myrtle Peril takes place in a hospital, which is where I've spent my last week. And having just the slightest issue concentrating on the book, and secondly, leaning into the fun elements of hospital life at the moment. So that has been set aside, and it will be there when Leo comes back from his surgery, and
Yes.
he and I will get back to work on that one, and he will be my expert consultant on the matter of things. But
Well,
it
like
has been.
Myrtle's cat. Myrtle's cat helps a little bit. She's always
Yes.
there.
Does she help? Kelly, who's
As much as cats can.
yeah, yeah. Well, yes, in her own mind, she's running the investigation, So in premeditated Myrtle, so Myrtle's cat is Peony, and there she is from book 3. She is a little black and white tuxedo kitty who is based on one of our kitties, or the first cat we ever had, Sophie, who, when she meowed, she sounded like she was saying no. No. And Peony is the one and only time I have ever taken a character from life, lifted entirely, personality, dialogue, everything, and just dropped into place in the text. And so there are moments in the Myrtle books that really came directly from personal encounters with Sophie / Peony. So
Fun.
when now we have another cat, Heidi, who eats everything, and things that are not food, like dust and paper and dead insects and rocks and the strangest things. And so I've given Peony those characteristics as well. And when Kelly wrote the letter that you probably got with your advanced reader copy of Cold-Blooded Myrtle, it describes, together with Miss Judson and her troublesome cat Peony. And I read that aloud to my husband, and he said, "Troublesome? She's not troublesome." And I said, "She eats evidence." He said, "Okay." So it's like, yeah, it sort of breaks all modern notions of chain of custody and
Yes.
preserving the evidence intact as you found it at the crime scene. Yeah, sort of, yeah. She throws that out the window.
There's a reason Sherlock Holmes never had a cat in the house.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what are some of your favorite books for younger readers? And you mentioned a few of the books that you like to read as a kid. What other books do you like recommending to people, especially if they love the Myrtle books?
Oh my gosh, this one's tricky. So I would say that the best thing you can do, if I'm going to go ahead and put some shout outs to some of my fellow Algonquin young readers, authors. One of my very most favorite middle grade books ever came out it's been about 2 years now, and it's by Sarah Jean Horwitz, and it's called The Dark Lord Clementine. And it's got this amazing cover of a girl with long blue hair standing in this field of swords. And it is about this girl whose father is the Dark Lord of Evil of the local village. And he's been cursed and has fallen under this spell that renders him incapable of ruling his dark kingdom. And so his daughter Clementine has to take over for him. And it is sharp and witty and hilarious and heartbreaking and so full of heart. It's just amazing. And she has a new book coming out, and I'm not sure when it's due, but I am just champing at the bit for that.
I'm gonna look for that one. That sounds right up my alley.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And we've got Will Ritter also at Algonquin Young Readers, who has a series for a YA series of Victorian mysteries that with a supernatural element called Jacoby. And there are 4 of those. And that was actually one of the things that drew my editor. Those books were one of the things that drew my editor to the Myrtle books, because she said these would be perfect for the younger siblings of the Jackaby readers.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are, and Will has a series out right now for for middle graders called Oddmeyer also. So
Oh
those
yes,
are fun
we
reading.
have the Oddmeyer books, and I've seen the Jack B books too. So those
They
are
are
familiar
all
titles.
great fun.
We like
Yeah.
the Oddmeyer ones. Yeah, those are wonderful. Are there any new authors or books that you're particularly excited about that maybe we don't know about that you're looking forward to, like coming into the holiday season that might be good gifts? I mean, besides, of course, Cold Blooded
I
Myrtle.
desperately want to get my own hands on a copy of the picture book Inside Cat.
Oh yes, that's a good one.
And because it just looks amazing. The both it seems like the ideal pandemic book. So I do a workshop for kids on finding inspiration in everyday life. It's called Seeing Like a Storyteller, and it sort of talks kids through my lifelong process of moving through the world as somebody who sees story possibilities in every dead insect eaten by her cat. Everything. Well, the last couple of years, it's been a little harder to move through the world and find inspiration in things that are different than what you see around you every single day. And so I've had to adapt that talk. I've had to adapt the mindset, first of all, for myself as a
Mhm.
writer who is stuck at home. As somebody who works from home, I have the enormous privilege of being able to shelter at home and being able to minimize contact and not contribute to the spread of the virus as much as possible. But on the other hand, that cuts me off from a lot of the things that I sort of rely on to get my brain going. And so I had to learn new methods, and I've adapted that workshop for a virtual workshop for one, and then also on how to tap into your regular environment, make it fresh and new, and find new things to say about it. And I think that's one of the that seems to be sort of the theme behind Inside Cat, and I'm excited to see that. And I think I spotted at one of the local booksellers in Kansas City where I went to do stock signing. There is a new book out called How Not to Get Murdered in a Quaint English Village.
Very
And
hilarious. We have it on our shelf. It's been very
I
popular.
I want that.
I
So
think Myrtle would enjoy it.
oh my gosh, yes, yeah. That is one of those books that I looked at. I was like, I wish I had written that. That's fantastic. So
Yes, that is a good one. There, one of my favorite picture books that came out that's cat themed is called Negative Cat, and it's a
oh
young boy that wants to adopt a cat, and his family finally gives in. But the cat does all the things that cats do, and he's not very friendly, and everybody doesn't. I mean, the boy loves the cat, but the other family members do not. And at the end of the book, he hasn't cleaned his room in several days, so he like furiously cleans his room, and he decides to sit down and read a book, and then the cat comes down and sits next to him throughout the whole book. And it was inspired by in one of the cat rescue organizations in the state of Pennsylvania, where they invite kids to come read to the cats because they found out that it helps the cats with their socialization and also helps the children with socialization and learning to read. But I
yeah.
like it because sometimes my cats are pretty crazy until I sit down and relax myself, and then they're like right next to me while watching TV or reading a book. So it's one of my
And
favorites.
the funny thing is, I was telling you right before we started that my cat Heidi, who eats everything that I mentioned, today is her gotcha day. We had her for 4 years today, and
Exciting.
one of the reasons that we met Heidi was because when we went to the shelter. So sadly, the cat who inspired Peony passed away suddenly while I was writing the very end of Premeditated Myrtle, which just broke my entire world. And all of our animals had come to us sort of serendipitously. The universe had presented them to us. She
Yes.
was no exception. She was a stray cat who just showed up out of the rain one night and took us through a really tough period in our lives. We had older dogs who were kind of going through hospice care, and when we had no idea we were actually cat people, and she moved into the house and she brightened up the entire world, and she brought this book with her. But when we lost her, we thought, we're not waiting on the universe anymore. I was so angry. It's like, we're just gonna go get cats from the
Yes.
shelter. And that we wanted a bonded pair, but all of the bonded pairs that were on the website for the shelter that we were looking at were under quarantine, or they were getting their neuters, or being read to by Girl Scouts. There was Girl Scouts there reading to the cats that we couldn't meet. So instead, we met Heidi, and she was just so sprightly and engaged and bright that she was like, "I'm coming home with you. I pick you." So
We had a similar situation with Celine, who we got in 2015 or 2017. We had lost one of our other cats suddenly, and we went to an adoption event that a local rescue was holding. And we went in, and it was my husband who lost the cat, so he got the first choice of which cat would come home with us that we would adopt. And there were two cats that came up to him, two female cats that came up to him, and we're like, okay, we're gonna go home and think about this. And one we couldn't stop thinking about was this little black medium-haired cat. And the interesting thing about it was that she apparently, according to the volunteers, was a very shy cat. And as soon as my husband walked into the room where she was being kept, she came out of where she's hiding and walked out to him and wanted to be held. They're like, it's taken us weeks for her to even get used to any of us. So the fact that she wanted and knew that he needed something,
she knew,
like,
yeah,
just came out, and she's been his cat ever since. Definitely.
Well,
She's the one I was telling you carries the toys around the house.
Oh yeah, we got completely conned because when we went to the shelter and met our kitty, they put her in my husband's arms, and she immediately fell asleep and started purring, and just was the most snuggly thing, and it just made my heart melt. And I thought, the world needs this. The world needs this man and this cat. And since then, she has been glued to me. I got conned. She's like, I know how to get you to pick me.
Yes,
Yeah.
they know.
They know.
They're
Yeah.
dubious.
So
what advice or insight do you have for parents or teachers when it comes to sharing your books with the kids in their life?
So the Myrtle books are in part, a big part, they are a celebration of curiosity, of curious kids, of kids that are fascinated by everything, and in part by kids who read up. So if you have a young reader who is reading at a level that's way above grade level, but all of the books available are adult books or YA books, and these are great age appropriate language level books. And that's, in part, that's sort of the technical reason I wrote them, was because I had these younger readers who were reading above their grade level, but with stories that were not written for them, with them in mind as a reader, with them in mind as the heroes. And so I think that's one of the things that's really exciting about it, is that they're great for strong readers to read on their own. They make fantastic family read-alongs, and they have levels of enjoyment built into them. So a lot of the chapter titles are in untranslated Latin, and there are footnotes, and there are words that many adult readers would not have encountered but a couple of times in their average reading. And I don't worry about, a fourth grader or picking up a book and not recognizing the word erudite, or not, they're going to get the context, they're going to the scope of the story. And so they're good for all of those things, for learning language, for sharing stories for getting kids curious about history and weird things, and for your kids that get obsessed with some fascinating element and can't wait to share with you the most interesting obscure fact that they've learned. um, these books are for them. They're, because Myrtle is that kind of kid and I was that kind of kid, and all of those footnotes are there just to engage and you know enjoy that sense of curiosity and that love of learning and that love of knowledge for knowledge's sake. When the knowledge that there is a specific shade of very, very, very almost black green, dark green paint called invisible green is not going to get you very far in life professionally, but it's awesome to know just for its own sake. And so if you're that kind of reader, if you're that kind of kid, these books are perfect for that because they're chock full of random fascinating things.
That is awesome. Do you get lost in research sometimes?
Oh, all the time. Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that's so fun about the Myrtle books, because all of my books are historical, but not all of the research that you come across you get to use,
Right.
because you in most historical fiction, um, it's hard to tweak. It's hard to bring invisible green into a plot point without having to sort of torture the idea. And well, Myrtle solved that by just having footnotes, and so many things with when you're writing historical fiction don't get to use because they just don't fit into the plot. They don't really do anything for the progression of the story. So yeah, we solved that with Myrtle, with having her to put in a footnote that here's another totally random fact that has nothing to do with anything. And you mentioned just the tiniest little tidbit about my historical costuming.
Yes.
That I've done in book 4, we have a character who is wearing a taffeta dress, and taffeta has this really distinctive rustle, and the rustling of taffeta has a name, and in English that word is scroop, scroop, but in French the word is frou-frou. So if you think of all those, that excess frilliness and ornamentation, it's frou-frou. Well, it's an onomatopoeia that references the sound of rustling, the sound that taffeta makes when it
I
rustles.
love it.
And so in book 4, there was the woman rises and walks across the room, and Myrtle notices that her dress is rustling, and then I was like, oh, gotta throw this in. And so now Miss Judson, who is French, gets her own footnote, and she gets to
Awesome.
explain
We'll be looking for that.
the utterly extraneous detail that the French, in addition to their advances in criminology, have a name for the rustling sound of taffeta.
Awesome. I can't wait to see the footnote.
Yeah. So
I just want to put a shout out there. Are there any more questions for Elizabeth, to go ahead and drop them in the chat or in comments on Facebook? I'm keeping an eye in both places. I'll be happy to ask Elizabeth questions. I have one more question for you. And I know you said you were going to do some thinking on this one. So what is one thing you wish people would ask you about, and what would you like to share about that thing?
well, the funny thing is that the answer I was going to give was that I was going to talk a little bit about growing up in Iowa and growing up in Ames, and how the setting of so Myrtle is in so many very real ways. She's me when I was her age. Her voice is mine and her personality is mine. She is braver than I ever was, and she speaks up more, and she's not apt to let people discourage her. But her middle class upbringing and her curiosity about the world is all very, very familiar to me. And when I was looking at what book 3 was going to be, and that idea actually came to me from my husband, who saw a social media post from one of our friends, and the miniature Christmas village in the book, the on the cover, the crime scene depicted in the Christmas village was in fact a real life event, not a real crime scene, but it was a friend's village got knocked over, and he said, I have the perfect idea for your next book. And so I just loved the idea of a crime depicted in a Christmas village. And when I was trying to consider what that crime might have been, and I'm not entirely sure how I got to a college town, but my dad was a college professor at Iowa State, and so I grew up in Ames, and I grew up near the campus of Iowa State, and so I always kind of thought I would end up in academia, and kind of miss that daily learning, and the idea of imagining yourself as an adult student when you're younger, when you're someone like Myrtle, who is just fascinated with learning and can't learn enough things. And so she gets to go exploring on the local college campus, which was inspired in a lot of ways by my experience as a kid in a college town. And in particular, the building on the cover, the bell tower, is inspired. In fact, it just is the Iowa State Campanile in every detail. And the funny thing is that I lived in Ames for many, 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 many years. I'm familiar with the Campanile. I know what it looks like. But one of my dad's journalism mantras as a journalism professor was, if your mother says she loves you, check it out. It's always double check your research. Make sure you have another source. Don't rely on things you think you know. When I got the copy edits, when I got the copy edits back on Cold Blooded with my amazing copy editor Sue Wilkins, she was asking me questions about, I had described the Campanile as being clad in rosy brick, and it was red, and it was all of this. And she's like, I'm confused about this building. And so I pulled up pictures, and it looks like this. And I know that video cameras are not, webcams are not the most accurate in terms of color, but I think we can all agree that that's not red. And I looked at that, and my brain just exploded. I was like, for 40 years, I have thought of that building as being red brick, and it's brown. It's completely brown brick. But so that's my childhood image of the Campanile is what has made it into the book.
I think it's because you think of a traditional college campus as always somewhere on the northeast with trees, and those buildings are traditionally red brick buildings. So maybe that's one reason you had that in your
Maybe,
mind.
but it was so funny because even though I wasn't really relying on my memory of the Campanile when I was writing the book, I had for, the 6 months that I was writing the book, my desktop wallpaper on my laptop was a picture of the Campanile in wintertime. And I looked at it and I'm like, yeah, there goes my credibility as an there goes the credibility of my eyewitness testimony right there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Well,
So to the best of my knowledge, no one has ever mysteriously fallen from the Iowa State Campanile and vanished. But wouldn't it be fast? Wouldn't that be?
but there's always campus legends to get started.
So many campus legends, and the one that really gripped me as a student at Iowa State was the steam tunnels under the mysterious steam tunnels and what might be under there. I've actually now seen YouTube videos, and it's just the HVAC system for the college, but how completely unromantic is that?
Yeah.
So I brought those steam tunnels back and all their mysterious possibility in Cold Blooded Myrtle, and that was such fun.
Well, on my college campus, there was because it was used during the Civil War as a hospital. One of the buildings was. There's a rumor that there is a Civil War soldier that wanders the grounds near that building at night during certain times of the year, like this time of year.
It's brilliant. Those legends just make things so interesting, and that's been the one. If I have anything, any inkling of anything that is not my favorite thing about the Myrtle books are have no supernatural elements at all. There are no ghosts. There's no anything. There's like the rumor of a ghost in Cold Blooded, but we don't ever think that she's actually going to find a real ghost. And it was the Premeditated Myrtle was the first thing I've ever written without paranormal, supernatural, fantastical elements in it. And I have found, oddly enough, occasionally I'm like, I wish I was writing something with a ghost in it right now. But mostly her fascination, her passion for science and period detail takes over for the world building
Yeah.
is just as rich and wonderful for me as a writer. So don't
So
miss the ghosts quite so much.
So we have one of our best customers and good friends, Amy Gardner. She is the librarian at McKinley STEAM Academy here in Cedar
Ooh.
Rapids. She said that you should check out the steam tunnels at Mount Mercy University here in Cedar Rapids. She said they're
Ooh.
scary. When the power is out, the water is just dripping down the walls.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so my creepy college tunnel experience. I went to the University of Iowa and lived in the dorms, and there was a tunnel that went from my dorm to the dining hall. And when you went at breakfast at 6:30 in the morning in the winter, it was full of cockroaches. Yeah. Iowa State had better food. I'll just say that.
Well, we're at almost the top of the hour. If there's anybody that has any questions, go ahead and drop them, and I'll ask Elizabeth quick before we log off. Is there anything else you would like to share with us today before we end the broadcast?
No, just that I am now so homesick for walking across an Iowa campus in October. I
Oh, it's
can't even
beautiful.
express it. It's just such an evocative time of year, and I did so much of my early writing on those campus walks and looking at great architecture and
Yeah.
thinking deep thoughts, and I think anybody with that sort of proclivity is going to really enjoy Cold-Blooded Myrtle.
Yes, I'm enjoying it, and that's when I visited the college campus here at Cornell all those years ago. It was this time of year, and peak color season looked like something out of a movie, and I went there, and then I never left Eastern Iowa. So there is something magical about college campuses in Iowa in
There
October.
really is. There really is. So it's a
Well,
great place to spark a young reader's imagination.
definitely. Well, thank you for your time, Elizabeth. I hope that you can come visit us in
I
Iowa
can't wait
sometime
for
soon
that.
in person. We'd love to have you.
Next
And
fall.
yes, next fall when the next book comes out, we'll be looking forward to it. And you can get Elizabeth's books at our store at Swamp Fox Bookstore. You can visit us in person, online, swampfoxbookstore.com. We are also an affiliate of bookshop.org. And we actually have book plates on
Good.
hand
I was
from
going to ask.
Elizabeth. Yep, we got the book plate. So if you buy the book from us, directly from us, whether it's on our website or visiting us in the shop in person, we're happy to hand over one of the lovely book plates that Elizabeth sent to us via Kelly. So thank you so much, Elizabeth. We look forward to hopefully meeting you in person someday. And we thank you for your time.
Thank you. You were a brilliant conversationalist. This was
Thank
so
you.
much fun.
Thank you. We'll hope to see you soon. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.